The morning session in Judge Caprio's courtroom had flowed with its usual rhythm, soft murmurs, rustling papers, and the sluggish shuffle of people waiting for their cases to be called. But that rhythm shattered the moment the doors swung open with a sharp metallic clank. She walked in. A woman draped in a tailored white coat, the kind that shimmered just enough to broadcast a message: money, power, and absolute self-importance. Her heels clicked against the polished floor like a measured countdown, slow, deliberate, claiming the room inch by inch. Every eye drifted toward her, not because she sought attention, but because she demanded it simply by existing. Her chin lifted in effortless superiority as she scanned the courtroom. She didn't see people, she saw inconveniences. A court officer stepped forward politely. "Ma'am, if you could please." She cut him off with a flick of her wrist. "I know where to go. Don't hover." The officer's jaw tightened, but he stepped back without a word. Judge Caprio, seated on the bench, looked up only briefly, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in careful assessment. He was a man who had seen disrespect before, but this woman carried a different flavor, something cold, rehearsed, and dripping with entitlement. The prosecutor whispered to his assistant, "This one's going to be a handful." His assistant didn't argue. The woman chose a seat in the front row, crossing her legs so sharply that the air seemed to tense around her. Her expensive perfume wafted outward, contrasting sharply with the dusty scent of old wooden benches and courthouse files. A few spectators leaned away, unsure whether they were avoiding the fragrance or the attitude wrapped inside it. A young mother holding her toddler tried to offer a polite smile. The woman rolled her eyes. "Please, don't." The mother flushed red, lowering her gaze. Judge Caprio watched this exchange quietly. The woman reached into her purse, retrieving a gleaming phone. She tapped the screen aggressively, typed a message, then muttered, loud enough for half the courtroom to hear, "This place looks like a charity basement." "Honestly." Whispers blossomed in every corner. A man 2 seats away stared at her with disbelief. "Lady, have some respect. People here have real problems." She didn't even glance at him. "And none of them matter to me." Her voice carried a sharpness that sliced through the room like a blade. Even the court clerk paused mid-sentence, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Judge Caprio finally leaned toward his microphone. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "is everything all right over there?" She looked up with an expression carved from marble. "I'm fine. This place is just cramped." A few spectators gasped softly. The officer from earlier took a step forward again, ready to intervene if needed. Judge Caprio didn't scold her, not yet. Instead, he offered a gentle, measured nod. "We do our best. Thank you for your patience." Her lips curled into a smirk. It wasn't gratitude, it was mockery. As more cases moved through the docket, the woman grew increasingly irritated, tapping her heel, sighing dramatically, checking her phone, adjusting her jewelry with pointed theatrics. When a teenager nervously approached the bench for a small traffic violation, she muttered loud enough for others to hear, "Why am I waiting behind children? This is absurd." Court Officer Rivera whispered to another officer, "She's itching for a confrontation." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the clerk called out, "Case 47B, Patricia Lorne." The woman stood instantly, lifting her chin again. "That's me," she announced, as though the courtroom existed solely for her. She stepped forward, gliding toward the bench with a swagger so deliberate that it felt almost hostile. Judge Caprio looked directly at her now, not with irritation, but with understanding. The kind of understanding that came from decades of reading people the way others read books. "Miss Lorne," he said, "please step forward." She stopped in front of him, eyes locked, unblinking. And then she smiled. A cold, confident smile that promised one thing. This courtroom battle had only just begun. Patricia Lorne stood at the bench with an expression that hovered somewhere between boredom and disdain. The courtroom's air, always thick with nervous energy from anxious defendants, felt even heavier now, dense, almost metallic. She tapped a manicured nail against the wooden podium, each strike a tiny act of defiance. Judge Caprio reviewed the file slowly, giving her space to settle, to breathe, to respect the process. She did none of the above. "Ms. Lorne," he began gently, "you're here regarding multiple violations." "Well, obviously," she cut in, her voice like ice splintering. "Let's not drag this out. I have real things to do today." A controlled silence fell over the courtroom. People looked at her, then at the judge, then back at her as if witnessing a train clicking toward its first moment of derailment. Judge Caprio lifted his eyes, the movement slow and deliberate. "We'll address this as efficiently as we can," he said, still steady, still calm. "But efficiency doesn't replace respect." Patricia gave a soft laugh, sharp, bitter, almost theatrical. "Respect? In this place?" The prosecutor stiffened. Court officer Rivera narrowed his eyes. A few spectators exchanged glances, the kind that carried unspoken warnings. Caprio remained composed. "Ms. Lorne, do you understand the charges?" She sighed dramatically. "3 tickets. Whatever. My assistant usually handles this nonsense." An elderly man sitting behind her whispered, "Unbelievable." Patricia didn't turn around. She didn't have to. Her contempt filled the room as clearly as her perfume. The judge continued reading through the file. Patricia rolled her eyes so hard that even the court clerk looked away, embarrassed for her. When Rivera approached to ask her to quiet down, she snapped, "Keep your voice to yourself. I'm not here to be scolded by employees." Rivera's mouth tightened, but he stepped back. The prosecutor shook his head slowly. "This is going to get messy," he muttered under his breath. Judge Caprio took note of every gesture. He looked at Patricia and spoke softly, "This courtroom expects basic courtesy. You're not required to like the process, but you are expected to follow it." She folded her arms. "Are you done lecturing?" A murmur rippled through the gallery, half shock, half anticipation. Caprio didn't react. He had seen hostility before. What he watched now wasn't anger. It was entitlement, polished and practiced. "Ms. Lorne," he said, "the way you conduct yourself here matters." "Oh, spare me," she said, tilting her head. "I've donated more money in 1 year than this entire building costs to run. I'm sure that buys me a little flexibility." The entire room froze. Flexibility. As if justice were a service one could upgrade with a platinum credit card. Caprio closed the file. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even change his posture. "Money does not purchase respect," he said quietly. Patricia smirked. "Doesn't it?" Rivera took a step forward again, ready this time to intervene if Caprio gave any signal. The judge didn't. Instead, he asked, "Is there anything else you wish to say before we continue?" Her eyes narrowed. The air thickened. Something unrestrained flickered behind her stare, a challenge, a dare, a spark of cruelty. And then she leaned forward. "Well," she said slowly, "since you're asking, I assumed a judge would be a little more, what's the word, professional. But maybe this is what passes for authority in a budget courtroom." Gasps shot across the room. A woman in the back covered her mouth. The prosecutor lowered his pen mid-scribble. Caprio remained perfectly still. Patricia tilted her head, smiling in victory, believing she had outmatched the judge before the battle even began. But then Caprio spoke. "Ms. Lorne," he said gently, "I'm going to ask you a question, and how you answer it may change the course of this entire case." The courtroom held its breath. Patricia's smile faltered, just slightly. A subtle crack appeared in her confidence. The first crack of many. The courtroom seemed to contract inward as Judge Caprio opened the folder stamped with a case number that now felt etched into the collective tension of the room. 47B, Patricia Lorne. The rustle of paper sounded unusually loud, as though the entire space was waiting for what would come next. Patricia stood poised at the podium, chin raised, eyes sparkling with a smug confidence that made several spectators exchange uneasy glances. She behaved not like a defendant, but like someone reviewing a contract she intended to reject. Judge Caprio cleared his throat softly. "Ms. Lorne, I am now beginning the official review of your citations. I expect no interruptions." Her lips curled. "If you insist." He ignored the jab. Violation 1. Failure to yield, resulting in near collision at Pine and Harriman Street. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. "The pedestrian walked into my path. I wasn't at fault." The prosecutor, Mr. Holden, adjusted his glasses. The pedestrian was in a marked crosswalk, Your Honor. Patricia snorted. Marked barely counts. The paint was faded. Murmurs rippled through the room. A teenager in the second row whispered, "She's unbelievable." Judge Caprio lowered the file slightly. "Ms. Lorne, our city ordinances do not depend on the vibrancy of the paint." Her eyebrows shot upward. "Maybe they should." Holden exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Caprio nodded for him to continue. "Violation 2, Holden said. Excessive speed, 51 in a 30 zone. Patricia scoffed loudly. "Cars today are designed to go fast. Blame the manufacturer." Her tone was so unapologetically flippant that even the clerk, usually composed, paused mid-typing and stared. Caprio folded his hands. "Do you take any responsibility for these actions?" She met his gaze directly, her eyes gleaming with defiance. "Responsibility is a broad term. I'm responsible for my time, my business, and my life. I'm not responsible for every slow driver who can't keep up." A gasp broke from the back row. Holden shook his head. Rivera, standing near the wall, had gone from watchful to deeply irritated. "Violation 3, Holden continued. Verbal harassment of a traffic officer who attempted to issue a warning." Patricia's nails tapped the podium again. "I told him he should focus on criminals, not well-paying citizens. That's not harassment, it's advice." "Advice," Holden repeated with disbelief. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Lorne, would you classify calling the officer a uniformed pest as advice?" She didn't blink. "Constructive advice." Laughter, nervous, stunned laughter, bubbled from two spectators before they quickly stifled it. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Are we done reciting petty infractions?" Caprio closed the folder. His voice, calm but sharpened, cut through the air. "No. We are far from done." For the first time, Patricia shifted, only slightly, but enough to expose the faintest hairline fracture in her self-assured armor. Caprio continued, "This courtroom is not negotiating your comfort. It is acknowledging your actions." She opened her mouth, but he raised a hand gently, stopping her. "Ms. Lorne," he said, "you are not being judged on wealth, influence, or status. You are being judged on behavior." Her jaw tightened. "Behavior is subjective." "Not today," Caprio replied. Holden stepped forward. "Your Honor, may I present the additional documentation?" He placed a sealed envelope on the bench. Patricia frowned. "What is that?" "I wasn't told." "It contains the dashcam footage from Officer Ramirez," Holden said. The courtroom collectively inhaled. Patricia's confidence flickered, dimming like a candle caught in a sudden draft. "Footage," she repeated, voice losing its icy steadiness. "Yes," Holden said. "Footage that contradicts your statements." Judge Caprio tapped the envelope once, thoughtfully. "Ms. Lorne," he said, eyes locked on hers, "before I open this, is there anything you wish to correct?" The room fell silent, heavy, expectant. For the first time, Patricia didn't smirk. She didn't interrupt. She didn't speak. And that silence was more revealing than anything she'd said all morning. The dashcam envelope rested on the bench like a dormant threat, its silence louder than any accusation spoken aloud. Judge Caprio didn't open it, not yet. Instead, he folded his hands, giving the courtroom a moment to breathe. Patricia's eyes remained fixed on the envelope, her confidence flickering with every second of uncertainty. Caprio watched her carefully. Years on the bench had taught him that people revealed more in silence than in any prepared defense. "Ms. Lorne," he said softly, "step back for a moment. I'd like to speak to you with clarity." She straightened her posture, as if preparing for battle. "I've been clear." "Not about the charges," he replied. "About yourself." Her jaw tightened. That wasn't the angle she expected. Caprio leaned forward slightly, his tone even. "When you walked into this courtroom today, what was on your mind?" Patricia blinked, caught off guard. "On my mind? I was here to resolve this. Quickly." "That's not what I asked," Caprio replied. "I asked what you were thinking." "I don't see how that matters." It matters because your behavior is not happening in isolation. It's connected to what you believe about this courtroom and about the people in it. A ripple moved through the spectators, an emotional shift, a subtle anticipation. Patricia inhaled sharply, frustration tightening her shoulders. "Judge," she said, "with all due respect." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering respect now?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. Caprio didn't push further. Instead, he continued with a steady, almost soothing tone. "I've seen thousands of defendants stand where you are. Some angry, some afraid, some confused. But you," he paused, "you walk like someone who has never been challenged." A few spectators murmured. Patricia's cheeks flushed, though she tried to hide it behind a cold stare. "That's an opinion," she replied. "It's an observation," Caprio said. "One I made from the moment you stepped through those doors." Patricia's fingers tightened on the podium, knuckles paling. Her composure wavered. Caprio pointed gently, not accusingly, toward her hands. "You're upset. More than you want to admit." Her eyes hardened. "I'm annoyed, not upset." "There's a difference," Caprio acknowledged. "But annoyance doesn't usually come with this level of defensiveness." She scoffed. "Defensive? I'm simply stating facts." The judge's voice remained calm, but his eyes held a pinpoint focus. "You interrupted 3 times before I finished a sentence. You dismissed an officer. You belittled this courtroom. That isn't confidence, Ms. Lorne. That's a shield." Patricia swallowed, the sound faint but noticeable. The prosecutor watched with quiet fascination. Rivera stood still, arms folded, studying Patricia's shifting expression with the careful attention of a seasoned officer. Patricia tried to regain her footing. "I don't appreciate being psychoanalyzed." "This isn't analysis," Caprio replied. "It's context." He reached for the case file again, turning a page slowly, deliberately. "I want to understand the person behind the violations, not just the violations themselves." "That's unnecessary," she insisted. "Just fine me and let me go." "Is that what you think justice is?" he asked. Her eyes darted away. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Caprio's voice softened, but the softness carried more weight than anger ever could. "Justice isn't transactional. It isn't something you purchase and walk away from when it's convenient." Patricia didn't respond. Caprio let the silence stretch before he continued. "Ms. Lorne, before I review any footage, I need to know something important." She looked up, wary. He paused, studying her face as though searching for the truth beneath her polished facade. "Did you walk into this courtroom believing you were above the law?" Her breath caught. The entire courtroom seemed to lean in, not physically, but emotionally, waiting, watching, hanging on the edge of a precipice. Patricia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Caprio nodded slowly. "Your answer to that question will determine how I proceed." Her expression faltered, and just as she finally drew breath to speak, Caprio lifted the sealed dashcam envelope between 2 fingers. "Because this," he said quietly, "may answer it for you." Prosecutor Holden stepped into the narrow space between the bench and the podium, his expression composed but unmistakably sharpened by purpose. He carried a thin binder, nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, yet somehow more intimidating than the sealed dashcam envelope itself. The binder represented something Patricia had never genuinely encountered: consequences with structure. Judge Caprio nodded. "Mr. Holden, you may proceed." Holden opened the binder with a crisp snap. "Thank you, Your Honor." He glanced at Patricia only briefly, but the weight of that glance drew the attention of every spectator. "Ms. Lorne," Holden began, "you've told us repeatedly that your actions were harmless, that your status, your time, your contributions, somehow exempt you from ordinary responsibility." Patricia folded her arms. "Correcting your wording, my time is more valuable." Holden didn't respond to the bait. Instead, he turned the first page toward the judge. "Let's discuss the events of July 18th. At 9:42 p.m., you were recorded traveling 51 miles per hour through a residential zone." Patricia lifted her chin. "And I told you, modern cars." Holden cut her off cleanly. At that same moment, a 7-year-old child was stepping onto the curb. Officer Ramirez activated his lights because your speed created a dangerous situation. The courtroom stiffened. Patricia's smirk faltered, for a half-second, but enough for the room to notice. "And here," Holden continued, flipping another page, "is the statement from the child's father. He reports that you yelled at him when he confronted you after you finally stopped." Patricia's voice sharpened with sudden indignation. "He approached my window aggressively." Holden remained steady. "His statement contradicts that. He describes you rolling down your window and saying," he glanced at the page, "teach your kid how to walk before you accuse me of anything." A stunned silence filled the room. Patricia's eyes darted downward, then up again, simmering. "People exaggerate." Holden continued without acknowledging her defense. Next incident. 2 days later. The near collision at Pine and Harriman Street. The pedestrian, Mr. Kowalski, states that he made eye contact with you before stepping into the marked crosswalk. "He shouldn't have stepped out," she snapped. Holden flipped another page. "And yet, he says you accelerated." Murmurs erupted around the courtroom. Caprio raised a hand gently. "Order, please." Patricia tightened her grip on the podium. "I was late. I needed to be somewhere." The crosswalk was faded. He hesitated. "Ms. Lorne," Holden said, "your pattern isn't hesitation. It's entitlement." He delivered the statement with no aggression, just fact. Her face flared with anger. "You're twisting everything to make me look reckless." "You're doing that on your own," Holden replied calmly. A ripple of shocked admiration spread through the room. Even Rivera allowed the faintest raise of his eyebrows. Holden continued, "Officer Ramirez attempted to issue a warning, not a citation. You responded by calling him," he read from the report, "a uniformed pest with a flashlight." Patricia opened her mouth, but Holden raised his hand. "We're not done." She froze. The prosecutor reached into his binder and extracted a thin plastic sleeve. Inside was a printed photograph, high resolution, time-stamped, unmistakable. He placed it on the judge's bench. "This image," Holden said, "is from a security camera positioned at the intersection. It shows Ms. Lorne using her phone, while driving through the same area where the child was nearly struck." Gasps surged across the courtroom like a tidal wave. Caprio leaned forward, studying the image. The tension in his expression tightened, controlled, but unmistakably concerned. Patricia's face drained of color, then filled again with a burning defensive fury. "That's impossible. That angle, where did you even—" Holden's voice softened. "The camera belongs to a local business. They submitted the footage voluntarily after witnessing your behavior." Patricia's breath stuttered. Her eyes flicked toward the dashcam envelope, then the photograph, then back to Holden, her mask of superiority cracking faster than she could rebuild it. Holden closed his binder with a quiet but decisive snap. "Your Honor," he said, "this concludes my preliminary review. I have one more piece of evidence to present, but I believe it requires the court's full attention." Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "Proceed." Holden reached into his briefcase. Patricia watched, frozen, not in arrogance this time, but in fear. "You may want to brace yourself, Ms. Lorne," Holden said. He withdrew a second envelope. Thicker, heavier, marked confidential. Patricia's knees visibly buckled. The courtroom held its breath as Holden set the thick confidential envelope on the table. It wasn't opened yet, only placed, deliberately, like a future strike waiting for the right moment. Judge Caprio watched him with wary patience, then nodded once in permission. Before Holden reached for it, he shifted slightly. "Your Honor, before we proceed to the contents of this envelope, the prosecution calls its first witness." A ripple moved through the room. Patricia stiffened. Judge Caprio exhaled quietly, a calm center within spiraling tension. "Very well. Bring in the first witness." The side door opened. A man stepped in, shoulders hunched from memories he didn't want but carried anyway. The father from July 18th. His hands were clasped together tightly, knuckles white. Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed, as though daring him to speak. He took the stand. Holden approached. "Sir, please state your name for the record." "Daniel Mercer." "And your relation to the incident in question?" His throat bobbed before he spoke. "My daughter. She was the child stepping off the curb that night." A hush spread, deep and heavy. Holden stepped back, giving him space. "Tell the court what you witnessed." Mercer inhaled shakily. "I saw her car coming fast. Too fast for the street. I grabbed my daughter's arm. If I hadn't," his voice broke, "if I didn't pull her back at that exact second, she would have been right in her path." Patricia rolled her eyes loudly enough for everyone to sense it. Judge Caprio's brow knit in subtle disapproval. "And after she stopped?" Holden prompted. Mercer's jaw tightened. "She yelled at us. Said I should teach my kid how to walk. Like she almost hitting my child was our fault." A collective gasp moved through the room like a wave. Patricia slammed a hand on the table. "Because you were overreacting. People overreact all the time." "Ms. Lorne," Caprio warned softly, "you will remain silent unless spoken to." Patricia clenched her jaw, nostrils flaring. Holden nodded to Mercer. "Thank you. No further questions." Mercer stepped down slowly, his shoulders lighter, as though releasing a weight he had long carried alone. "Next witness," Holden announced. A woman entered, middle-aged, composed, but with a certain quiet intensity. The store owner whose camera captured the phone footage. She held herself like someone who didn't seek conflict but refused to run from it. She took the stand. Holden asked only 2 questions. "Did you retrieve this footage yourself?" And "Why did you submit it?" Her answer was simple, but it struck deep. "Because someone needed to." She stepped down, leaving Patricia trembling with barely controlled fury. Then came Officer Ramirez, expression professional, voice steady. "Ms. Lorne was agitated," he testified. "More than that, she was dismissive. She refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing and insulted me directly." Patricia scoffed loudly. "Oh, please. You were on a power trip." "Ms. Lorne," Caprio said again, this time with a deeper note of warning, "you are not helping yourself." Her breath became ragged, the edges of her composure fraying like an unraveling thread. Each witness left a bruise on her confidence, stripping away layers of denial she had wrapped around herself like armor. The courtroom watched her shift, shoulders tightening, eyes darting, lips pressed thin in the tremor of rising panic. Holden waited until the last witness exited before returning to the confidential envelope. "Your Honor," he said softly, "before we open this, one final witness has arrived unexpectedly." Caprio looked up, startled. "Another witness?" Holden nodded. "Yes. And their testimony directly concerns Ms. Lorne's pattern of behavior." Patricia bristled. "Who? Who could possibly?" The courtroom door creaked open. Everyone turned. A figure stepped inside, someone Patricia instantly recognized. Someone she never expected, never believed would come forward. Her face drained of color. The spectators leaned in. Holden's voice dropped to a measured, devastating calm. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls this witness to the stand." Patricia whispered, barely audible. "No, not them." The figure who entered moved with hesitant steps, bracing for Patricia's reaction. The gallery leaned forward, whispering in a soft frenzy. Patricia stared, wide-eyed, breath caught in her throat. "Your Honor," Holden said quietly, "the prosecution calls Evelyn Marlowe to the stand." Patricia flinched. "Evelyn? No, this is ridiculous. She has nothing to do with this. She's only here to—" Judge Caprio raised a hand. "Ms. Lorne, you will let her speak." Evelyn stepped up, clutching her purse strap so tightly her fingers trembled. She was elegant, poised, but visibly shaken. Her eyes never met Patricia's, not even once. Holden folded his hands. "Ms. Marlowe, please state your relationship to the defendant." Evelyn swallowed. I used to work for her. For 3 years." The murmurs grew louder. Patricia exploded. "She was a house manager. She's not a credible witness. She's just bitter because she didn't meet my standards." "Ms. Lorne," Caprio warned, his tone cutting, "you're nearing contempt." Holden continued gently, Ms. Marlowe, can you describe why you left her employment? Evelyn's voice wavered. She was verbally abusive. Every mistake was an embarrassment. Every request was treated like an inconvenience. She belittled people. She belittled me. The prosecution let the words linger like smoke. Evelyn breathed out, eyes finally lifting toward the judge. I'm here because I saw the news footage, and I wasn't surprised. I thought the court should know what she's capable of. Patricia's chair screeched as she shoved herself upright. This is outrageous. She's lying. She's absolutely lying. I never abused anyone. Judge Caprio's patience cracked just slightly. Ms. Lorne, sit down. Her knees buckled into the seat, but her fury didn't subside. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, like a storm building inside her ribs. Holden stepped back. No further questions. Evelyn left the stand quickly, almost fleeing, eyes glossy. Silence swallowed the room. Caprio leaned forward. Ms. Lorne, I believe it's time you speak for yourself. Please take the stand. Patricia froze. No. I don't have to. You do, Caprio said firmly. Or I will draw negative inference from your refusal. Stand. Her legs moved stiffly, like she was walking toward her own reckoning. She sat in the witness chair with an air of defiance that cracked at the edges. Holden approached. Ms. Lorne, do you acknowledge the events of July 18th? She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I acknowledge that the father was dramatic, the officer was rude, and that everyone here is desperate to villainize a successful woman. The gallery murmured disapprovingly. Holden continued, do you feel any responsibility for the near miss involving the child? What responsibility? Patricia snapped. I didn't hit her. People exaggerate. They always exaggerate. And your comments to the father? She waved a dismissive hand. Heat of the moment. He was hysterical. And Officer Ramirez? He deserved it. Her voice was growing louder, shriller. Her fingers dug into the wooden armrests. A vein pulsed visibly at her temple. Holden softened his tone intentionally. Ms. Lorne, do you understand how your behavior is being perceived today? That struck her. Her face tightened, lips trembling, not with sadness, but with indignation. People like you don't understand women like me, she hissed. I worked for everything I have. I'm surrounded by incompetence every day. If I don't hold people to a standard, no one else will. Her voice cracked, and the crack became a fissure. The world is full of parasites waiting for someone like me to mess up so they can gawk and point at the rich villainous. That's what this is. Isn't it? Isn't it? Ms. Lorne, Caprio began. She slammed her fist on the stand. I am not the villain here. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Her breathing turned jagged. Her eyes darted wildly. Her control gone. Then she rose halfway out of her seat and shouted, And if any of you think I'm apologizing, you're delusional. The bailiff moved in quickly. Caprio banged his gavel. Order. Ms. Lorne, you will sit down now or be held. But something behind Patricia caught her eye. She froze mid-scream. Her face drained of life. Someone had stood up in the back row. Someone who had just entered. Someone she clearly knew, intimately. The courtroom turned. Patricia whispered, voice breaking. Why are you here? The courtroom hung in stunned silence. Patricia stood frozen, breath shallow, eyes locked on the figure who had risen in the back row. Her meltdown was still echoing in the air like the remnants of a violent storm, but this presence, was something else entirely. Judge Caprio steadied himself. He had seen outbursts, arrogance, even theatrics, but what had unfolded moments before was different. Something had snapped inside Patricia Lorne, and now something, or someone, had triggered an even deeper fracture. He tapped the gavel once. Bailiff, maintain order. No one moves until I say so. His voice was no longer soft, no longer composed. It held a weight that made even the walls seem to straighten. Patricia's lips barely moved. You weren't supposed to come. The person in the back took a step forward, then stopped. Judge Caprio raised a hand. "State your name and your reason for being here." The figure spoke with a quiet steadiness. "My name is Leonard Rye. I was Patricia's business partner." A low shockwave spread through the courtroom. Caprio's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Rye, are you here as a witness?" Leonard swallowed. "I am, Your Honor. I wasn't going to come. But after seeing what happened today, I realized I needed to." Patricia sank back into her seat like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "Leonard, don't do this," she whispered. Caprio's gaze hardened. "Mr. Rye, step forward." As Leonard approached, the courtroom lights cast a long shadow behind him, stretching like an omen across the floor. Patricia watched him as if every step he took pulled something vital away from her. When he stood before the judge, Caprio leaned forward. "Before we proceed, Mr. Rye, I need to know, is your testimony relevant to the charges at hand?" Leonard nodded. "More than relevant." A murmur rippled across the gallery. Judge Caprio closed his eyes briefly, gathering his thoughts. His voice, when he spoke, carried a tone that signaled a shift, decisive, resolved, unmoving. "Mr. Holden," Caprio said to the prosecutor, "approach the bench." Holden did. The judge motioned for Patricia's defense attorney, Ms. Breen, to join. What followed was a hushed conversation, but the tension emanated from the bench like heat from a flame. Holden spoke with conviction. Breen countered, her hands trembling but determined. Caprio listened, processing each argument like a man weighing moral stones. Finally, he spoke loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "This case has reached a point where the truth must no longer be coaxed, it must be confronted." The room fell silent. Caprio fixed his gaze on Patricia. For the first time, the sympathy that had lived in his eyes earlier was gone. His expression was not cruel, but resolute, like a man who had tried compassion and now turned to justice. "Ms. Lorne," he said, "your conduct today has raised serious concerns regarding your credibility, your self-control, and your respect for this court. You have insulted a police officer, belittled a witness, and created a disturbance incompatible with these proceedings." Patricia's chest rose sharply. "They all lied about me. Everyone here is conspiring." Caprio cut her off with a single, thunderous word. "Enough." The sound echoed like a strike of a gavel on stone. Patricia flinched. "Your behavior," he continued, "forces this court to reconsider how to move forward." He turned to Leonard Rye. "Mr. Rye, based on what you've indicated, your testimony may shed light not only on the defendant's character but also on her broader pattern of conduct. If what you wish to present is factual, relevant, and admissible, this court will hear it." Patricia grabbed the edge of the table. "Your Honor, you can't. Leonard isn't. He's only here to ruin me." Caprio didn't blink. "Ms. Lorne, this court is not here to ruin you. It is here to reveal the truth." His tone dropped to a deep, steady gravity. "And in pursuit of that truth, I am making a ruling." The courtroom inhaled all at once, like a single living creature bracing for impact. Caprio lifted his gavel. "This court will—" He paused. Leonard's eyes filled with something between dread and relief. Patricia's fingers dug into the wood as though she were clinging to the last edge of her world. Caprio lowered his gaze, voice measured and unforgiving. "Allow Mr. Rye's full testimony." A collective gasp erupted. But Caprio wasn't finished. "And based on the defendant's behavior today." He raised the gavel higher. "I am issuing an immediate—" The sound cut off as someone suddenly rose from the gallery, shouting, "Wait! There's something the court must hear first." The shout from the gallery halted the courtroom like a sudden freeze in time. Judge Caprio's gavel struck sharply. "Order!" Whoever spoke, stepped forward. A trembling woman rose from the second row, her hands clasped tight against her chest. She looked terrified to be seen, yet more terrified not to speak. Patricia blinked rapidly, confusion slicing through her fury. Who is that?" The woman approached cautiously. "My name is Anna Rowe, Your Honor." Caprio studied her. "Ms. Rowe, what is it that you believe the court must hear?" Anna swallowed hard. I'm the therapist Patricia saw for 6 months." A stunned whisper rippled across the room. Patricia's lips parted in disbelief. "Anna, what are you doing? You can't be here." Anna lowered her gaze. "I didn't come to betray you. I came because something about today feels dangerously familiar." Caprio raised a firm hand. "Ms. Rowe, anything you disclose must not violate confidentiality. The court will not accept protected information." Anna nodded. "I won't reveal session details. Only a pattern, a warning." Patricia's voice cracked. "Don't do this." Anna steadied herself. "Your Honor," Patricia's anger. "It isn't new. It isn't isolated. When she feels threatened, her instinct is to strike at anyone around her. Not out of malice alone, but out of fear." Patricia recoiled. "Fear? I am not afraid of anyone." Her words shook, fragile, almost pleading beneath the bravado. Anna continued, "She believes admitting fault means losing power. And losing power feels like losing identity." Caprio leaned back slowly. "I appreciate your restraint, Ms. Rowe. But the court must rely on admissible evidence. You may step down." Anna hesitated. "Your Honor, all I ask is that your judgment today considers not just punishment, but the possibility of repair." Patricia stared at Anna with a look that was not hatred, but betrayal layered with something more wounded and raw. Anna returned to her seat. Caprio breathed deeply, the air around him heavy with the moral weight of the moment. "Very well," he said. "This court will now proceed." He turned his gaze to Patricia, steadily, unwaveringly. "Ms. Lorne, please rise." Patricia rose slowly, fingers trembling at her sides. Her eyes darted between Leonard, Anna, the prosecutor, and finally the judge. The courtroom seemed to lean in around her, collapsing the space into a single point, this moment. Caprio spoke with a tone that blended sorrow and firmness. "This is not simply a case about a traffic incident, or a harsh word, or a single lapse of judgment. It is a case about dignity, yours, and that of the people you've affected." Patricia's throat tightened. Caprio continued, "The evidence and testimony presented today reveal a pattern. A pattern of entitlement, of belittlement, of disregard for the humanity of others." Patricia's eyes glistened. Even she wasn't sure if it was anger or something she feared to name. "However," Caprio added, "justice cannot merely punish. It must aim to restore." A murmur moved through the room. Caprio lifted a sheet of paper but didn't read from it. He spoke from memory, from conviction. "Your sentence, Ms. Lorne, will not be measured in fines alone. Money, in your case, means nothing. Instead—" He paused, allowing the weight of his words to build like a storm gathering strength. "You are hereby sentenced to 1 year of structured community restitution, including direct involvement with pedestrian safety programs, public service under Officer Ramirez's division, and participation in a dignity and accountability course overseen by court-appointed counselors." Patricia's eyes widened. "You can't make me clean streets." "I'm not asking you to clean streets," Caprio said gently but firmly. "I'm asking you to rebuild respect. For others. And for yourself." She looked stunned, struck, even, by the unfamiliar idea of growth rather than humiliation. But Caprio wasn't finished. "Additionally, due to your conduct today, you will attend mandatory court decorum training and submit to periodic evaluations." Patricia inhaled sharply. The sentence wasn't cruel, yet it felt heavier than jail time because it required honesty, self-reflection, vulnerability, things she had spent her whole life avoiding. Caprio lifted his gavel. "This is the sentence of this court." He began to bring the gavel down. But before it struck, before the decision was sealed, Patricia whispered, barely audible, "Wait. I need to tell you something." Caprio stopped mid-motion. The entire courtroom froze. Patricia looked up with trembling eyes, not angry, not arrogant, but terrified. "There's something none of you know," she said, voice cracking. "And if I don't say it now, everything you think about me will be wrong." The courtroom felt different that morning, charged, anticipatory, as though every wooden bench had soaked up the night's rumors and was now exhaling them into the air. By the time Judge Caprian entered, the gallery was already overflowing, citizens pressed shoulder to shoulder, waiting for a spectacle they didn't fully understand. Phones were silenced, but the tension hummed like static. The defendant, Mara Kellen, stood at the defense table with fingers twisted tightly around each other, knuckles white. Her eyes, still puffy from the meltdown she'd had on the stand the day before, kept flickering between the judge and the door, as if she were searching for an escape route that no longer existed. When Judge Caprian settled into his chair, she flinched at the thud of his gavel. "Ms. Kellen," he began, voice steady, "are you prepared to continue?" Her throat bobbed. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered, though her posture betrayed her, shoulders hunched, chin tucked, breath shallow. Caprian regarded her for a long moment, the silence stretching. The courtroom leaned in. "We have reached the stage," he said, "where the truth is no longer negotiable. The public is here today because your actions affected them. And transparency, uncomfortable as it may be, is part of justice." A ripple passed through the gallery. Mara winced, as though the words themselves had weight. Her attorney touched her arm. "Mara, look at him," he murmured. She did, reluctantly. Her eyes glistened. "Your Honor," she said, voice cracking, "yesterday I didn't mean to break down like that. I wasn't trying to manipulate the court." Caprian's gaze remained unreadable. "And yet your testimony contradicted itself 3 times. I gave you space to collect yourself. You took that space and filled it with further confusion." "I was scared," she said, louder now, struggling to keep her composure. "Everyone's watching me like I'm some kind of monster." The judge didn't lean forward, didn't raise his voice. His restraint was more powerful than anger. "Justice is not about who is or isn't a monster. It's about accountability." A murmur of approval rose from the gallery. Mara's head jerked toward them, eyes narrowing as shame flushed her cheeks. "Please," she said, "not like this. Not in front of everyone." Caprian's face softened imperceptibly. "Ms. Kellen, dignity is not something the court strips away. It's something individuals either uphold or abandon through their choices." She sagged into her chair, breathing unevenly. He continued, "Before I pass judgment, the prosecution has requested a public reading of the community impact statements. Normally I'd reserve that for sentencing, but given the circumstances, your evasions, your emotional volatility, I believe hearing them now may help clarify the consequences of your actions." Mara's eyes widened in horror. "No, Your Honor, please, I'm begging." Her plea was swallowed by the prosecutor rising with a folder in hand. "The people are ready to begin." The gallery straightened collectively, watching as Mara pressed both palms to her forehead, hiding behind them as though she could vanish. "Your Honor," her attorney interjected, stepping forward, "this will destroy her emotionally. She's already on the edge." Caprian held up a hand. "Emotional collapse is not the measure of justice. Truth is." Mara's breath shuddered. "Please, don't let them read it." "I can't." Her voice broke into a small, helpless sob. Judge Caprian tapped a single finger on the bench, a subtle, decisive rhythm. "This court proceeds," he said. The prosecutor opened the first page. But before he could read a single word, a voice from the back of the courtroom shouted, "Judge, you need to stop now. There's something you haven't been told." Every head whipped around. Caprian froze. And Mara, through her tears, slowly lifted her face, stunned, terrified, and suddenly very aware that everything was about to change. The courtroom still vibrated with the shock of the unseen voice calling out from the back. Judge Caprian's gavel struck once, sharp, commanding, but even that did little to steady the room. Dozens craned their necks, whispering, shifting. A tension so tight it seemed audible rippled through the crowd. "Who spoke?" Caprian demanded, scanning the rows. A man pushed his way forward, mid-40s, wearing an ill-fitted jacket as though he'd rushed from work. His hands trembled visibly, not from fear, but urgency. "Your Honor," he said, breathless, I tried to submit this earlier. They told me I was too late. But you need to read it. Before you go any further." He held out a sealed envelope. Mara Kellen's head snapped up. Her lips parted in disbelief, confusion, hope, all layered so tightly they were nearly indistinguishable. Her attorney rose beside her, cautious. Caprian leaned back in his chair, evaluating. "Who are you, sir?" "My name is Devon Hale," the man said. I'm connected to the events in the case." "Directly?" A shockwave of murmurs. Mara gripped the edge of the defense table. Her attorney stepped forward. "Your Honor, if this man has exculpatory information—" "We don't know what he has," the prosecutor snapped, rising with a scowl. "This is theatrics. Procedure exists to prevent this exact chaos." Caprian held up a calm hand. "Mr. Hale, why bring this now?" Devon swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to be dragged into this mess. But watching what's happening to her," he glanced at Mara, guilt tightening his features. "I can't stay silent anymore." Mara blinked, stunned. I don't know him," she whispered to her attorney. But her voice was trembling, uncertain. Caprian nodded once. "Approach." The man stepped forward, arm outstretched, holding the envelope as if it were a detonator. The prosecutor bristled. "Your Honor, I object. We cannot accept random, unverified documents introduced in the middle of a hearing." Mara's attorney countered sharply, "If it contains relevant information." "You don't know that," the prosecutor shot back. "Neither do you." Caprian let the argument hang in the air before speaking. "This court," he said, "will not be swayed by fear or convenience. Mr. Hale, place the letter on the bench." Devon did. His hands shook harder now. The judge looked at the sealed envelope for a long moment, as though it were something alive. Then he addressed the attorneys. "You will both have an opportunity to review this. But the court must determine if it warrants immediate consideration." Mara leaned forward, breath caught in her throat. Her stare was locked on the envelope like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Caprian broke the seal. The sound, a soft tear, seemed amplified in the silence. He unfolded the letter, eyes scanning the first few lines. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did, a minute straightening, a subtle tightening at the jaw. The gallery strained to read his face. "What is it?" the prosecutor asked, unable to mask his impatience. Caprian didn't answer. He continued reading, slower now. His eyes flickered across the page, once, twice, as though making sure he wasn't misinterpreting. Mara clutched her chest. "Please, please," she whispered, though she didn't know what she was begging for. Finally, Caprian lowered the letter slightly, just enough for the court to see that his composure was no longer seamless. "This," he said quietly, "changes things." A collective gasp surged. The prosecutor slammed his folder shut. "Your Honor, I insist on seeing the content immediately." "You will," Caprian replied. "But first—" He lifted the letter again, tapping its edge on the bench. "Miss Kellen," he said, voice grave, "you need to hear what is written here." Mara froze, wide-eyed. Her attorney tensed, bracing. Caprian inhaled. "According to this letter—" He stopped. Devon Hale stepped forward, voice cracking. "Your Honor, don't read the last paragraph aloud." "Not yet." The entire courtroom erupted. Chaos rippled through the gallery as Devon Hale's warning echoed, but Judge Caprian's gavel cracked down so forcefully it rattled the microphone. "Order!" he commanded. "This court will maintain order." The murmurs died reluctantly, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Caprian turned the letter face down on the bench, fingers steepled, eyes sharpening with a depth of contemplation that sent shivers through the room. Mara Kellen, usually poised, polished, untouchably smug, looked like a woman marooned on a sinking island. Her eyes darted between Caprian and Devon, desperation mixing with dread in a volatile blend. "Mr. Hale," Caprian said calmly, "approach the stand. You're now part of this proceeding whether you planned to be or not." Devon swallowed and obeyed. He moved stiffly, each step a battle between fear and responsibility. The prosecutor rose sharply. "Your Honor, I request immediate access to the letter's full contents." "This is highly irregular, and—" Caprian cut him off with nothing more than a look. "Counselor, unusual circumstances sometimes require unusual responses. The integrity of this court is not threatened by information, only by ignoring it." The prosecutor fell silent, fists clenched behind his back. Caprian shifted his gaze to Mara. "Ms. Kellen, before I proceed, you need to understand something. The truth within this letter may alter the foundation of everything this court has evaluated thus far." Her lips trembled. I don't know what he wrote, she whispered. Don't you? The prosecutor snapped. Mara's expression crumbled. I don't, she insisted, but the wobble in her voice betrayed her. Caprian lifted the letter again, unfolding the creases deliberately, allowing the tension to thicken like storm clouds gathering over a silent sea. You will all hear this, he said. The first portion, at least. The courtroom held its breath. He cleared his throat and read. Your Honor, I am writing because I witnessed the incident in question firsthand. I saw Mara Kellen confront the parking enforcement officer before the citation was issued. She was not simply agitated, she was aggressive. She threatened the officer, insulted him, and told him she could get him fired with a single phone call. She boasted about her status, her connections, and her money. She said nobody, least of all a street-level employee, could touch her. Gasps swept through the gallery. Mara's face drained of color. The prosecutor stepped forward, vindicated. This corroborates our statements from day one, Your Honor. But Caprian held up a finger to silence him. There's more, he said, eyes darkening. He continued reading. I didn't come forward earlier because I was afraid. Afraid of retaliation, afraid of the social blowback, afraid I'd be dragged into something far bigger than me. But the officer she insulted was my younger brother, and he refuses to defend himself. He said he didn't want to ruin her life. He doesn't believe in revenge. Mara's hand flew to her mouth. Her attorney sank slowly into his chair. But I believe in accountability. Caprian read, voice low and steady. And I believe you do too. He lowered the letter slightly. His gaze fixed on Mara, no anger, just profound disappointment. Mara Kellen, he said, do you have anything to say? Her breath hitched, her voice emerging as a fragile whisper. I didn't know who he was. That officer, he looked at me like I didn't matter. Like I was dirt. I reacted. I was wrong. But I didn't mean to insult him? Caprian asked. She shut her eyes, breaking. I didn't mean to hurt him. The prosecutor leaned forward. Intent does not erase impact. Caprian nodded slowly. Nor does privilege erase responsibility. A tremor passed through Mara's shoulders. But the judge's expression shifted, not softer, but heavier, as though another weight had just landed on him. Now, Caprian said, lifting the paper again, we come to the paragraph Mr. Hale asked me not to read aloud. Devon's breathing quickened. Please, Your Honor. I only ask for caution. Caprian stared at him. I understand. But justice cannot be partial. It must be whole. He turned the letter over for the room to see. Mara Kellen, he said, voice solemn, what is written here concerns you, and someone you have kept hidden from this court. Mara's head snapped up, eyes wide with raw fear. Hidden who? She whispered. Caprian's gaze didn't waver. The person named in this last paragraph. He inhaled deeply. And the revelation, he continued, affects your entire case. The courtroom braced. Caprian tightened his grip on the letter and began to read.